Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
You guys look like... What do they look like, Jimmy?
Dorks. They look like a couple of dorks.
Get those birds! Birds!
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
What? Are you kidding? We got some family here.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Brad and Darren.
Welcome to another edition of the It Modcast podcast. With me is Brad Gullickson.
And for gosh sake, watch your language.
That's not going away anytime soon.
Mouth Dork.
Come, devil. It will soon be night. Let us find shelter and listen to the wood spirits.
And your host, Darren Smith.
Warm. Warmer. Disco.
The Disco Dork. Come with me if you want to live. And welcome to the It Modcast podcast. It Modcast podcast? Weekend Dorkcast.
It's a cumcast.
Yeah, wait, what?
We just did cum quotes.
Oh.
Yeah, cumcast.
All right. That COMECAST for our listeners. So it's just us. It's the B&D show.
Just us. It's like Lost Weekend 3 all over again.
Yeah. Good times.
Nice slurp.
Thank you. Since Turtle Dork and Wife Dork are not with us today, we're just going to go through a brief little episode about our recent week in Dork. What'd you do this past 5, 6, 7 days? How long has it been since I've seen you?
About a week.
Yeah.
Well, today we're recording this on Sunday, the 27th.
Yep.
Tobe Hooper passed away.
Unfortunately, yes.
The director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
And even more importantly,
thank you,
the director of Life Force.
Thank you.
And I don't care how did this get made, what they had to say about it.
They're nuts.
It's a great film.
Yep.
It's a perfect movie.
Yep. It's a nuts film. I mean, the amazement and the flabbergastedness is warranted, yes, but that movie's awesome.
You know, I think we've even done a Weekend Dork, if not a Remember the Alamo episode about Life Force when the One Loudon Theater played it a few years back.
Yeah.
And when you watch that movie, it starts off, it's in space, some astronauts find an alien craft. Inside that alien craft are 3 space vampires, Matilda May being one of them, who proceeds to perform the entirety of that movie butt-ass naked.
Thank you.
And when you're 13 years old, she's teaching you things.
Yep.
But it's more than just space vampires. As the film progresses and as Matilda May's cosmic vampire wreaks havoc through London, it becomes an apocalypse movie. And by the climax of that film, you imagine anything that goes on beyond the credits of Life Force is Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah.
Like, the world is not coming back together. Certainly not London.
It is destroyed.
Yeah. And, Steve Railsback gives one of the great unhinged performances. It's almost uncomfortable to watch. And I think if you go into that movie with the wrong mindset, you could laugh at the intensity of his performance. But I think it really works with that script and that tone and the surrounding absurdity of that movie.
I would say for me as a kid, or even as an adolescent when I was a young adult, watching Life Force, that was the thing that struck me the most. And I found, I don't want to necessarily say unnerving, but like what scared me about that movie was the tone of it. Like I could just, I mean, it's bonkers in its concept and like in the grand scheme of things, like what happens and everything like that. But I think that, you know, there's a sincerity to it, and there is, you know, I mean, it's so bonkers because you have a mixture of horror elements, science fiction elements, like action elements. You have all these different things, and it doesn't do it for me. I don't feel like it's tongue in cheek. Like I feel like, you know, I feel like it's paying respect to all those different genres in this hybrid of a beast.
It's a possession movie at points.
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart, when the Matilda May creature infects his body.
Yep.
And that, I mean, if you're a Captain Picard fan, watching Patrick Stewart play Matilda May is weird, to say the very least.
Yeah.
It's super unsettling.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's got great practical work.
Oh, my goodness.
Throughout.
Yeah.
And it's a movie that does not let up on the gore. It's extremely graphic. It's full 80s R-rated. And I've missed that period. Plus, like, the cinematography of it's beautiful.
Yeah.
The score is great.
Yep.
If you have not seen Life Force, this is your opportunity. Shout Factory has a really nice Blu-ray of it. I think you can find it on Amazon for like $10. Buy it immediately.
Yeah.
You know, obviously Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a masterpiece. For me, it's probably the scariest movie I could possibly put on.
Really?
So much so that I don't watch it on a regular basis because it really does creep me out.
Yeah.
Leatherface for sure, but the hitchhiker at the start of that film that they pick up on the side of the road in the little minivan, that entire exchange with those kids gives me hives watching it.
Yeah.
The family, you know, the father, grandfather, the casual nature of their cannibal home, you know, that dinner sequence, grandpa coming down in his wheelchair and they're trying to put the mallet through her poor head.
Yeah.
It's not what I would call a fun movie, but it's an incredibly affecting film.
When we talked about, whenever it was brought up about like our favorite horror films or what have you, like I've mentioned on the podcast that Martyrs was the one that affected me the most. And when I would say it's my favorite, I don't mean like, you know, it's the best or the greatest or you know, that's the one I throw on all the time. I just mean like it is the one that affected me, like literally I found horrific to the point where I've only seen it like 1.5 times. Like I can't, like you just said, it's not one I go back to watch. I've only seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre one time, and that was way back when I was maybe 10 or 11 maybe. And because of how it affected me then, I've never had the desire to go back and watch it. Like I just remember like that feeling that you had in that van. Like I remember feeling that way and then some, you know, for the duration of that film, so much so that I have a you know how like your psychology is weird. Like it will take away the details. For me, it takes away the details of that particular traumatic event of me watching that film, and it generalizes it and then it compartmentalizes. So it just says how if I felt you know, the most terror, let's say like at the very end or at that scene in the van. Well, being so far removed from it, my memory just focuses on that absolute terror. And it says, well, that movie made you feel like that, regardless if it was in the middle or the end of it. So whenever you think about that movie, I just associate that feeling with that film, period. And so I think that, you know, that's why I have never gone back to rewatch it, because when I think of that film, I think about how I felt watching it, and how I felt watching it could have been like the height of my fear or what have you, the effect of it could have been like at the very end or at the beginning or a point in the middle. But this far removed from it, I just associate that general feeling with the entire film. So it just makes me apprehensive to go back and put myself back in that emotional space.
I'm right there with you. I have not rewatched Texas Chainsaw Massacre in probably a decade.
Yeah.
And when I think about that film, it's moments that really stick with me. And like I said, I mean, it really bothers me to watch that movie.
Yeah.
I deeply respect it. But, I think about The Hitchhiker. I think about that murder in the house, with the girl with the red short shorts and the, Tobe Hooper and Daniel Pearl, they shoot her from behind real low angle. And you see her exposed back in that halter top that she's wearing.
Yep.
Is that a halter top? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know clothing,
Yeah.
but whatever that outfit is, her back is exposed.
Right.
And she goes into the house and she goes to that one metal door and Leatherface is behind it and he's got a meat tenderizer and he just bonks her on the head and then hold on. How does it go? She sees Leatherface. She starts to bolt for the door and he grabs her and pulls her back towards that metal door. She's kicking and screaming. He bonks her. No. Hold on. Like I said, it's been a decade.
Yeah.
He pulls her into the room. And that's when the door slams, and then she gets put onto that meat hook, and then the boyfriend comes, and it's the boyfriend who gets clogged on the head. I'll tell you what, listeners.
So the boyfriend doesn't get put on the meat hook?
No, she gets put on the meat hook. That's why she's wearing that outfit. So you see her exposed back, and you're like,
okay.
Look at that fine back. Oh no, meat hook. But I guess what that clock on the head, whether it's the girl or the guy who gets whacked. I'm pretty sure now it's the guy. I'm reliving the film as we talk.
Yeah.
Don't mock me, listeners on Twitter. And then the scene after that, obviously the dinner table, Grandpa with his hammer, and then the climax where she's running down the street. She gets picked up by that truck. She's completely lost her mind, and Leatherface is chasing after her, swinging the chainsaw in the air and doing that maniacal dance.
Yeah,
that weird jiggle that Leatherface does with the chainsaw over his head.
Yeah.
That's almost as uncomfortable as when he puts that chainsaw through the kid in the wheelchair.
One thing that sticks out to me about this particular film, and then just films of that era, in comparison to horror films of today. Most recently, I saw Annabelle Creation. I think that was the most recent horror film.
You can't even put those two together.
Well, and this is, and I'm getting to the point. So that scene that when he shoots that girl low to the ground, or any scene, any shot from that movie. But we'll just go with the scene when the camera's low and it's shooting her from behind before she even gets into the house.
And
if you freeze frame that, if you do pause that and you look at the frame, and I don't just mean the composition of the frame, but I mean the lighting, the texture, and maybe it was a lot of it or all of it is because it was shot on film. But the way that film looks and feels before anything scary happens, before you even see a Leatherface, she's standing in the front yard in front of a house. But just the way that frame looks, and the rest of that film, the way that it looks, that to me is a very important and key element that I feel is missing from modern horror films, where you look at a film and you look at a frame and you feel uncomfortable, you feel scared, you feel uneasy. There's an atmosphere because of how the film looks. And again, I don't mean just composition, but I just mean how the film looks from the lighting. Like, because nowadays, in the era of 4K projection and high def cameras and everything like that, everyone is lighting the films and they're lighting the scenes like really bright, and they're putting these nice colors in it, and they're concerned with like resolution. But I think that what that does, specifically in the horror genre, for me, is it takes away that mood. It puts a clean veneer on it, and it pretties everything up, so it makes it appealing to me. And for me personally, if I'm looking at horror, I want to be revolted. I want to be afraid. I want to be horrified. That's why I can't go back to revisit Martyrs, because it genuinely horrifies me. I don't find anything about that movie appealing. from a visual aesthetic, just, and with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it just looks, the way the film looks is, I think, a direct correlation to how you're supposed to feel if you were there. Like if you were on those steps, or if you were in that house, you don't want anything to touch you. You wouldn't want to touch anything like that. It just oozes out of the frame. And I think, I don't know, like films of that era, even going back to look at like the first Friday the 13th film, like look at how that film feels when you look at like, when nothing scary is happening.
Yeah. When you're compared to Annabelle Creation or
just
whatever.
Any recent stuff. Yeah.
I think a lot of that credit for Texas Chainsaw should also go to Daniel Pearl, the cinematographer, who would go on decades later and also shoot the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which also
the Platinum Dunes one?
Yeah, the Platinum Dunes one, which is also beautiful in a very different way to the original film.
Right.
He had a weird career. He shot other Tobe Hooper movies like Salem's Lot and Invaders from Mars.
Oh man,
he did a lot of music video work, like Mariah Carey videos and Guns N' Roses videos, Van Halen videos.
Oh damn!
But now I'm going to blow your mind because he also shot Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which is one of the ugliest movies.
What?
And it's so, it's infamous for how dark and ugly that film is and how impossible it is to discern one creature from another creature when it's dark outside.
Yeah.
The fact that Daniel Pearl had anything to do with AVPR and Texas Chainsaw Massacre blows my mind.
It's crazy. Well, I don't know. He's shooting in a different era with different tools, and so.
But again, he also shot the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, which is beautiful. I think what that reveals to me is it's all about collaboration, what you're working with, what kind of budget you've got, what time constraints you have. But yeah, there's a little odd Texas Chainsaw Massacre tidbit.
Huh.
The other movie I really, really wanted to talk about with Tobe Hooper, The Mangler.
I've never seen that.
You've never seen The Mangler?
Is that the one with Robert Englund in it?
Yeah, he's in it, and he owns this. He owns this factory, and inside this factory is a laundry press. And I'm trying, again, it's been a while since I've seen it, but there's some backstory where somebody died and it's haunted, or maybe the laundry press is possessed by a demon or the devil. And Ted Levine is the police officer who's called in to investigate an accident in which the Mangler, this massive laundry press, eats one of the factory workers.
Yeah.
And in his investigation, he discovers this conspiracy and possible supernatural possession of this mechanical object. And it's based on a really short, kind of fun Stephen King short story. And Tobe Hooper just took that ridiculous idea and blew it up into this Exorcist wannabe. But instead of a little girl, it's a laundry press. And Robert Englund, he's caked in latex makeup as this old man. And he's got these fabulous braces and these two canes that he limps around on.
Yeah.
And, it has no reason to be good, but it absolutely engages and is totally entertaining.
Really?
And Ted Levine, this was after his stint as Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs, but certainly many years before his tour of duty on Monk.
When did this come out?
Oh, it's mid-90s. Like 94 or something like that.
Huh.
It's I think it's worth your time. If you're a B movie fan, it's I think the last really solid Tobe Hooper movie.
Yeah.
He went on to make many, many more films of varying degrees of success. The Toolbox Murders remake is kind of fun for a trashy little movie. Unfortunately, Tobe Hooper is one of those guys where he just stopped getting the opportunity and the money to develop serious projects.
Yeah.
And he's sort of faded in the cinema landscape.
You know what's interesting when you think about that? I read, obviously there are a lot of, RIP posts on social media. And I saw this one post where someone was saying that, the tragedy in it is that, him, who was the other most recent great that we just...
George Romero. Same deal.
Yeah, it said that
John Carpenter,
how like in later years they couldn't get financing to make some really good films. And what you just said makes me think, we have these indie horror makers. Like, who's the lady that just directed, who's the person that did The Babadook?
Gosh, I cannot remember her name.
Well,
Jennifer Kent, right? Jennifer Kent? Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with that. So she doesn't have like a huge budget. She is most definitely not of a horror status or an icon like George Romero or Tobe Hooper, but yet she has a budget to make a really strong and effective horror film. You look at films like the ones that we championed most recently, It Follows, The Witch, like these films that are really lower to I won't even say like lower mid budget, and they're really good and they're really effective. Like, I wonder
why can't Romero find the dollars to put that together?
Yeah, how can Carpenter and Romero and Hooper not get at least that amount of money? They're obviously of higher pedigree and have a legacy established to that. If some unknown indie person can get that budget and pump out one of these films, then
but the reality is they have gotten opportunities at bat. John Carpenter's last film, The Ward, with Amber Heard. It's not a good movie.
Yeah.
Now, he's not working with a lot either. He has a very tiny budget. The script he has there is lackluster.
Yeah.
But the same deal with Tobe Hooper. You look at his films, Mortuary, The Toolbox Murders, and films like that. Gin, that was his last movie. Gin.
He did it?
Yeah. And they're okay. They got made.
Yeah.
Now, is that because people aren't offering him quality scripts? Is that because he doesn't have the right amount of money? Does that mean has he been aged out of it?
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino is always going on about how he doesn't want to continue to make movies until his talent leaves him.
Right.
It's that bestseller syndrome, right? Where John Grisham cranks out a book a year, and who really cares about Camino Island and The Whistler when all people still want to talk to him about are The Firm, The Pelican Brief, Time to Kill, The Client, things like that. His heyday.
Yeah.
Very few filmmakers, novelists, artists in general have a lifetime of quality in them.
Yeah.
And that's just life.
Yeah, and unfortunately, especially for the fans, it's a hard truth. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, and I don't know. And again, I'm not there with Tobe Hooper, George Romero, and John Carpenter, right? I don't know what their circumstances are, and maybe it's that, maybe it's these other factors.
Yeah,
but it's certainly unfortunate. You want your heroes to continue to make brilliance. And sometimes they don't get that opportunity.
Yeah. Speaking of, like I said, I just saw John Woo just had a trailer for his latest Hong Kong production called Manhunt, and from my understanding, it's an adaptation of a really good book. Like the novel is pretty acclaimed.
It's not about John Wilkes Booth after he assassinated Lincoln, is it?
No, it would be
that's
dope,
a pretty
though.
good book, though. I'd watch the John Woo version of that.
Right. And so I watched this trailer, and it feels like every movie that came out in the 90s and the early aughts that was inspired and trying to be John Woo. And I think I'm hoping it's just a poorly cut trailer, because it makes the movie look really bad and really amateurish. But even outside of the cutting of that trailer, there are elements in that have nothing to do with the editing and the shot choices to put in the particular trailer. Like the moment when there's one of the characters of the film is, I don't know if there's a wedding or there's a banquet outside and there's a shootout happening and they're sliding feet first down this table and shooting two guns, like, famous John Woo. Like
that sounds great to me, Darren.
But the way that it's shot, firstly, and then today, where we've come so far, like we live in the age of John Wick now, to that shot would be...
styles change.
Styles do change.
Tastes change.
Change. And for me personally, like there are probably people out there who see that trailer and like, oh shit, like I want to see that movie. John Woo's back to form. But for me, I feel like he's stuck in like this bygone era. Like,
well, there's something to be said about, being the product of the time in which you were born, right?
Yeah.
So when, the films that we talk about, when we talk about Tobe Hooper, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Life Force, Texas Chainsaw 2, Poltergeist, those are films that are definitely marked by the 1970s and the 1980s. John Woo is certainly marked by the 1980s and the 1990s. The same will be said about filmmakers from today. Guillermo del Toro is going to be tied to the early aughts. We'll see if he breaks free and does something new.
Well, I think it. Well, let's just stick with John Woo for an example. I think it depends on what that director, or in this case, the director, is known for, like what he pioneers. So with John Woo, obviously he is a huge contributor to the action genre and the style of shooting action, not just blowing shit up, but like what we think of when we think of the hero in performing an action. Before, it was, again, Stallone kick down the door, stand there, say something, and shoot from the hip holding an M60. Well, John Woo said, let's have that action hero be more active in that scene. Let's fill the frame with movement, including the action hero. Let's pay homage to the gunslingers of the Wild West and have him have 245s instead of, holding a gun down by his side. So, and then shoot slow motion and then have them be, lateral movement and all these different things. So he's known for doing a particular type of thing. But again, it happens in a particular year, a particular period. And so because that catches on, it spawns
a style
and imitators and things like that. But like you said, styles change.
And we get bored with them.
Right. Now, someone like Del Toro, or say Tarantino, for example. Like Tarantino started back in the early 90s, but his style is more, I don't say it's strictly visual. It's visual, but also I would say performance and script and the words and dialogue. Tarantino, I think, is a more well-rounded filmmaker when you think of style as opposed to John Woo. When you think of John Woo, you don't think of, okay, what does he have Chow Yun-Fat saying? You know what I mean? It's just action.
I think if you look at Tarantino's movies today, if you look at The Hateful Eight, Django Unchained, and Glorious Bastards, they are very different than Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Jackie Brown.
And that's what I want.
That's the difference.
And that's what I want from the new Manhunt trailer. I want to see an evolved
And if you look at somebody like Steven Spielberg,
right?
Ready Player One looks very different than Jaws.
Right. And so, and again, and for me, I'm just saying, like, that's what I want from a filmmaker to evolve. Now, and I say that to go back to, Tobe Hooper and, Carpenter and Romero and what they were doing in films later in their career as opposed to earlier in their career, and just how unfortunately they may or may not have been as well received as.
I think you can't have this conversation and not also talk about the fact that they were working in the horror genre, and it's a bastardized genre.
Yeah,
it's looked down upon, especially in that time, as beneath true art.
Yeah,
and once they were labeled horror directors, they could not escape that.
Yeah.
I think John Carpenter came the closest to breaking free, with films like They Live and Escape from New York and, even Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Yeah.
A Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
I mean, he did step outside of horror to, if you look at Invisible Man versus Big Trouble in Little China, different, again, varying degrees of success.
Yeah.
But Romero and Tobe Hooper never had that opportunity.
Yeah.
It's the Mr. Spock syndrome. You get labeled something and you either embrace it or fight it.
Yeah.
And I think in the case of Leonard Nimoy, George Romero, Tobe Hooper, they fought it at different times, accepted it at others.
Yeah. That's crazy how that works.
But, as we get older, and, we're always talking like, oh my gosh, 2016, so many people died. 2017, so many people are dying. Oh, guess what, guys? It's just because we're getting older, and the people we love are also getting older, and we're going to lose more and more greats, more and more masters as we go along.
Yeah.
But when that happens, what I do like is the outpouring of love that you see on Twitter and social media. It is conversations like this one where we can say, you know what? It's been a decade. It's been 20, maybe almost 30 years for Darren since he's seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
We can barely put the plot together. We just have the images burned into our brain.
And you know what? That says something about a piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
That says something that you might not have the specifics, but from an emotional standpoint, it has left an imprint on you.
Yeah, we're still scared of it.
Yeah.
And, we're 40 years old.
Yeah. It's crazy.
The next time someone plays Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the big screen, I'm going.
Yeah.
And that film does get played at the AFI and the Alamo on a fairly regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
I have avoided it personally because, again, the Oogies.
Yeah.
But it's time to revisit it. And Life Force I watch on a pretty regular basis, if not every year, every other year.
I missed that screening at the Alamo, which I'm very upset about.
That screening, like your Mad Max Fury Road screening, is one of the loudest screenings I'd ever gone to.
Oh my!
And Lisa and I, there was like 10 people in the theater that day, and our brains were melting out of our ears. It was so damn loud.
Yeah.
And if you remember that ending where they're at the foot of the church, the steps of the church, and there's bodies piled on top of bodies, and it looks like this Frank Frazetta painting.
Yeah.
And the entire city is screaming at the audience. London is on fire.
Yeah.
And the sound of that final scene is deafening.
Yeah.
And again, just a movie that has to be seen on the big screen. So thankful.
I hope I can catch another theatrical screening of that. I'm really, as a matter of fact, I've never seen it theatrically. I've only seen it on home video.
I've seen it twice now. I've seen a screening over at the Alamo, that super loud one, and I did catch a 35 millimeter presentation of it at the AFI Silver a few years back, and it was also gorgeous.
Yeah,
and that theater A, front row, so perfect.
I'd love to catch it there. All right, what else you got?
Well, I mean, I have another tribute conversation I wanted to present you. Tomorrow, the 28th of August, will mark what would have been the 100th birthday of Jack Kirby.
Oh, wow.
The co-creator of Captain America, Thor, The Avengers, Fantastic Four, the X-Men. Every when you think the Marvel Universe, you think Stan Lee so often because he's in every film in some form of cameo.
Yeah.
But you really also owe a lot to Jack Kirby, if not even more credit to Jack Kirby. The Marvel method of storytelling was that Stan Lee would offer an outline, and sometimes that outline would only be a paragraph, and Jack Kirby would take that paragraph and plot an entire comic book around it. Draw and illustrate the entire thing, based on that one paragraph. And then Stan Lee would come in afterwards and fill in all of the word balloons and the captions and the thought balloons to make the images work. And that's how Stan Lee was able to put his name on 1 million comic books. Yeah. Because he had a bullpen of artists cranking out the actual sequential art.
Yeah.
Now, Jack Kirby, he came from, New York City. He was a kid who, was slinging newspapers on the street. He learned to draw based on copying the funnies in the newspaper. He eventually met Joe Simon, and the two of them went to work at Timely Comics, which would soon be rechristened Marvel Comics. And they created Captain America in 1941. Actually, I think 1940 is when they did the first issue of Captain America, but it didn't hit the newsstands until 1941, March, I want to say. And that was, before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Right. And if you remember the first issue of Captain America, the cover, you've seen it recently on Twitter all over the place in light of Charlottesville, of Captain America punching Hitler in the face. Yeah. And that came out before America entered the war. It was an expression of Simon and Kirby's outrage at what they were seeing happening in Europe. And when we finally did enter the war and the draft happened, Kirby was enlisted into the U.S. Army. And they knew they were going to get drafted, and they just cranked out as many comic books as they possibly could before the war took them away.
Yeah.
And they produced a ton of material. They produced 10 issues of Captain America. And then he went overseas. He did land on Omaha Beach 3 months after D-Day. He saw serious combat in the European theater. And, he came back to the United States and continued his conquest of comic books, this budding art form in America. There was always contract disputes and profit disputes, and he left Timely Comics for National Comics, which would become DC Comics, and he did a bunch of stuff for them, the original Sandman, the Newsboy Legion, Manhunter, but eventually in the 1960s, he came back to Marvel, and he re-met Stan Lee on the verge of Lee wanting to get out of comic books. He was fed up of spandex heroes. He didn't think he had much to offer. And Stan Lee's wife, Joan, said, well, what do you want to write? Write that. And if it succeeds, great. If it doesn't, who cares? You're going to leave anyway. So he took his wife Joan's advice, and he outlined the first issue of the Fantastic Four. And Jack Kirby was his partner on that comic book. And that comic book launched the Marvel Universe. And today we are reveling in the MCU because of this partnership between Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. And because of the Marvel method, and Stan Lee was such a bullhorn for himself and the company, he became the face of Marvel. And his name was spread throughout pop culture. And, Excelsior, that's who we now think of when we think about Marvel Comics. Yeah. And Jack Kirby just never got the credit or the spotlight the way that Stan did.
So it's like the Neptunes. Stan Lee is Pharrell and Jack Kirby is Chad Hugo.
You're damn right. I don't know what that reference is, Darren, but yes, I think you're correct.
All right.
And you look at what he did in those early issues of Fantastic Four. He created the entire cosmic universe of the Marvel. Right from his brush came Galactus and the Silver Surfer, the Inhumans, the Watcher. He created Black Panther. He created Wakanda. I mean, he is a massive force in all the things that we love today.
Yeah.
And you go back and you read those comic books from the early 1960s or even the early Captain America issues, and the endless captions and word balloons overwhelm. They're exhausting, and they mark those comics in their era. Like we were talking about with the horror films, John Woo, right. They're a product of their time. And when you read Stan Lee's words, they feel like comic books that were written for kids. And, the great thing about Stan Lee is he wanted to focus on the melodrama of what it would be like to be a fantastical creature like the Thing, right? This he has all this strength and all this power, but he is also suffering from tremendous self-loathing, and there's an internal struggle. And Stan Lee put readers inside the minds of these characters and their concerns, having to pay rent on the Baxter building, Peter Parker having to find some cash to help his aunt out so they can get groceries. The brilliance of Stan Lee was he put as much importance on the realities of this situation as he did, Dr. Octopus and the Mole Man, right?
Yeah.
That's the big contribution from Stan Lee. But Jack Kirby, he developed the soul of Marvel Comics and what we love today. And if you strip, it's like Quasimodo just came into our apartment. Hey, Brian. If you strip those early 60s comics of Stan Lee's word balloons, his dialogue and his captions, you still have an incredibly dynamic comic book.
Right.
And Jack Kirby's art still looks fresh and exciting. And, the Kirby crackle that he would put throughout all his books, these little black explosions with fractal abstract shapes floating around the background. It's gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. And so, for the last several days, in anticipation of his birthday tomorrow, I've been going through old issues of Devil Dinosaur and Fantastic Four, his Thor run. Like when that Thor Ragnarok trailer dropped, it felt like finally that universe, that we saw in the first two films, is fully embracing its comic book roots.
Yeah.
The way that the other films in the MCU already have. I never felt like Thor 1 and the Dark World quite captured the majesty of the mighty Thor, the God of Thunder, in the 4-color form.
Right.
And Ragnarok, you can see it in the background of these panels. You can see Jack Kirby's designs. You can see Walt Simonson's creatures. And you can even see that Kirby crackle around the title card at the end of the trailer when that 80s logo Thor Ragnarok comes up and everyone's like, oh, it looks so much like Guardians of the Galaxy.
No, it doesn't.
I'm going like, dude, look at all that Kirby crackle.
Yeah.
I am truly, truly excited for that film and to see just more of Jack Kirby's vision being introduced into these films.
Yeah.
And, I got to say it, for as contentious as the Kirby estate and, Marvel Entertainment have been over the years, they settled a lawsuit in 2014. The Marvel and DC are also celebrating Kirby's life this month. And if you pick up any one of their books, you'll see ads for Jack Kirby comics. DC has done a series of interpretations of his characters. They've done new issues of Commandy. They've done new issues of The Demon. Marvel has issued True Believer comics. For $1, you can buy an entire issue of Devil Dinosaur. You can buy an entire issue of Thor versus Hulk. And that's super cool.
Yeah.
And each comic has a little Kirby 100 logo all over the place.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've been like obsessing over the last week. Just saying happy birthday to Jack Kirby, saying goodbye to Tobe Hooper, celebrating these titans of my fantasy life.
Yeah. Right.
Be on the lookout at Film School Rejects. I did write a love letter to Jack Kirby this week, and it's the most fun I've had writing anything for One Perfect Shot or FSR. I'm really pleased with myself, if I don't mind saying so. And that's only because I just love the man so damn much. And when everyone cheers on Stan Lee, I also want you to cheer on Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
I want to continue to fight his fight, Walt Simonson's fight, Steve Ditko's, John Romita's, Bill Finger, these guys who contributed so much and don't quite get the spotlight like Stan does.
Yeah. All right. Also, you were catching up on The Defenders?
Yeah, I got to the third episode.
All right.
Look, I'm just not getting grabbed by it. Okay, Darren, stop having so much, excitement at that fact. I think I'm honestly, really, there's very little TV that I get into now, and it takes a lot.
It takes some dragons to get you.
Yes.
Yeah.
It takes some dragons to get me pumped.
Yeah. Zombie dragons.
Yeah, for television. I will finish The Defenders someday.
Yes. All right. For my weekend dork, we're just going to keep it short and sweet. I actually just today, before I say what I did today, be on the lookout for we're going to have a review cast of Death Note, Netflix's movie where Adam Wingard does his take on a live action adaptation of the popular manga and anime. This is actually the third live action adaptation of Death Note. There are 2 Japanese productions, if I'm not mistaken, a part 1 and a part 2. Check those out. If you checked out the Netflix movie, I would say check those out. But anyway, in preparation for watching Death Note, I went back and started rewatching the original animated series. I'll talk about that on that review cast, but that was partly of what I was doing for my weekend dork. What I did today, though, was I decided to go check out James Cameron's his reissue of Terminator 2 in 3D. So Cameron's been in the news lately for multiple reasons, I think. One of them is because he's finally supposedly about to start production on his 4 Avatar sequels. And then there was something else he was in.
He said some stupid shit about Wonder Woman because he's a dumbass.
Well, on top of that, even before that. But then there's this, his comments about Wonder Woman and his opinion that it's a step back in representation of feminism and female strong characters or whatever. His opinion is his opinion, whatever, dude. Okay. Patty Jenkins, big ups to you. Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, everybody, the cast of that film, the production of that film, all the fans, we all have a great superhero movie in Wonder Woman and what Patty Jenkins did, regardless of his opinion or anybody else's. If you loved it, then you loved it. Okay. So with that being said, he's just been in my mind lately. And then the lead up to the announcement of Terminator 2 being re-released in 3D, I don't think it's a secret that ever since the advent of Avatar, James Cameron is a big proponent of 3D and the format.
I wish it was a secret.
And so one thing I will give James Cameron, regardless of my thoughts on his films, I do, being the resident tech dork, I do love his pioneering of technology, whether it be for use in film or whether it be for use in science, the discovery of and the exploration of nature, the progression of knowledge in that area, oceanography and all those things. Like he has played a huge part in that, and other fields that people don't even consider. So those accomplishments and those endeavors that James Cameron sets out upon, I'm a huge fan of that, and I really dig that. When it comes to films, though, the 3D thing, on the podcast, I have been a supporter of 3D, and done right, I am. So when he said that he was reissuing Terminator 2 in 3D, I was kind of interested, only because I was of the understanding that James Cameron would be overseeing the specific conversion to 3D. And if it's going to be James Cameron overseeing a 3D conversion, I'm assuming that the 3D conversion will be exceptional, because he is someone who is known for being a tyrant on set when it comes to, attention to details and what he wants from visual aesthetics from his films, technical aspects of it. Like, he's very hands-on. He's very much a part of that process. So I'm assuming this guy, who is the hugest proponent for 3D in cinema that we have, so much so that he creates new technology and new cameras himself. He develops them with his team. I'm assuming, all right, well, he's going to do something special with this 3D conversion, and being that this is his film, I would assume that the conversion will benefit from his eye. So I watched the film. So let's talk about. I just want to touch on the film itself first.
It's the first R-rated movie I ever saw in the theater.
That is myself. Dope. I mean, you could do worse. I think mine was RoboCop.
You could do better.
Than RoboCop?
No, than Terminator 2. You see RoboCop. That's better.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So anyway, so the movie opened. The movie starts, and you have the voiceover, and then you have like the Skynet battle in the future, the humans and stuff like that. And so this is where I took note of the 3D. But anyway, the opening of that film, you have the battle in the future, and the voiceover of what happened, and then the title sequence comes up, and she says one, a robot would be sent back to protect him, and another one would be sent back to get him. It'd just be a matter of who would get him first. And then the title comes up, and then the theme song plays. Like, I guess, I don't know if it's nostalgia or whatever, but that was pretty great opening. And then the T-800 freaking skull comes through the flame, and in 3D, that shit was bad. Even if it wasn't in 3D, I always remember that just being badass. That is props to Stan Winston and his studio. I am not someone who is against the use of CGI in film, but we always champion practical effects here. And whenever you talk practical effects, in especially genre films, from the 70s, 80s on up, I mean, you have to. Your conversation isn't valid to me if we don't talk about the wizardry of Stan Winston. Stan Winston is the practical Weta of his day. Like, he was the original. Like, that studio, I'm pretty sure, is just filled with people who are inspired by the magic that dude created. And just the design of the T-800, just from a crafting standpoint, one of the all-time greatest, cinema visages, props, whatever you want, the practical effects, just an amazing piece of work. And when that chrome skull comes through the flames, it's just badass. So then the story picks up with, we're in the present day.
So California.
This is Edward Furlong's big screen debut, and the first thing that happens after that opening is Arnold Schwarzenegger gets sent back in time.
Garth Brooks playing.
Right. So he gets sent back in time. He goes in, I need your clothes, your boots, your motorcycle. And then after that happens...
It's not Garth Brooks. It's some other hunky.
They play Bad to the Bone when he gets his...
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that. So I don't want to say oddly enough, but I think today, if that scene were done with that song, it would come off as hokey or corny. So to me, surprisingly, it still works.
Like, I love that opening with him.
It is a really good opening.
He throws that dude on the fryer.
Arnold, here's the thing. Like, later on in his career, I'm not, the Last Stand and Escape Plan and all that. Like, I could do without that. But this Arnold is peak Arnold. Like, he's so good. He was just made. He genuinely was made to play the Terminator. Can be perfectly imposing and have presence in a scene on screen without having dialogue.
And he has humor in T2.
And he does. So we get the introduction of his character. Then we parallel his introduction with Robert Patrick's introduction. Best role he's ever done.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Best role he's ever done.
What about the Marine?
Best role Robert Patrick's ever done. From a physical performance standpoint, and even just with line delivery, just the sinister nature and how they differentiate the two robots, I think, was pretty incredible. And I don't know that I've ever caught this, that I've ever thought about it this much on this level. Not even like it's that deep, but I like the juxtaposition between things not being what they seem or circumventing your expectations. So Arnold looks like the original Terminator, who was a bad guy, who was a killer, but he's in fact a protector, wherein Robert Patrick's T-1000 looks like a police officer for the duration of the film, who's supposed to be a person to protect and serve you, but he's in fact the killer. And so I like
That's
that.
cool.
I like how they switched that up. So we get introduced to both of the Terminators first, and I like that choice to have them introduced back to back like that, because it puts them at the starting line side by side, because now they're in a race to get John Connor. And then we're introduced to young John Connor, again played by Edward Furlong. And man, I can't remember the last time I saw this film. Hold on, let me tuck my dog tags in. I can't remember the last time I saw this film, but I do not remember Edward Furlong's performance being this grating to me. It was the sore spot of the film. And unfortunately, it wasn't something that happens like in an earlier scene. I mean, he's in almost every scene of the film. And it was the thing that stuck out to me the most. It's never been something that I noticed before, but this go around, I just could not stand his performance, firstly, and I just couldn't stand the sound of his voice. So it makes me question like James Cameron's choice to cast him. So then after that, we're introduced to Linda Hamilton's character. And when this movie initially came out, I was not the same type of movie watcher that I am now, where I...
Handsome and sophisticated?
That too. Well, no, I was always handsome. Sophisticated, no. But the type to say, okay, I see Linda Hamilton now. The first time we're introduced to her, she's a different Linda Hamilton. She's doing pull-ups on a makeshift pull-up bar when she's tipped her bed up. My mind automatically goes back to where we left her at the end of the first Terminator.
Storms are coming.
Right. So to 2017, Darren is filling in all these years of her adventures. What has she been doing? The things that she's gone through to get her to where we see her today. When Terminator 2 first came out, like I probably was just like, oh man, she can do pull-ups. I can't do pull-ups. That sucks. So I say all that to say, I appreciate that transition of, how in sequels you either have a sequel that picks up immediately after the first film, or you have one that picks up where there's been a span of time that has passed. And in this case, it's the latter. And I like where we see her, because just the visual of her physicality compared to the end of the last film tells a huge story in just that shot. It tells a story about that she's gone through things since the last movie, the last film, and the events of that film, and her meeting Kyle Reese, and that ordeal that they went through, and like you said, her being in that Jeep and driving to that storm. Seeing her now, it's obvious that she's weathered some storms and she's preparing for a bigger one. And so I just like that there's storytelling just in the transformation of Linda Hamilton physically, and in not only physically but emotionally. She's a totally different Sarah Connor than she was from the first film. And so now she's in a loony bin because she's been spouting off some crazy, there's a cyborg coming from the future trying to kill me, and the Earth's going to end in August 1997, and we're all going to die. So they got her locked up. And basically the movie is about, young John Connor. Old John Connor in the future, reprogramming a Terminator, sending him back in time to protect his younger self and to protect his mom. All that, it's been years since I've seen it. I really liked all that trippy time travel shit. The shit that when you think about it, and it's funny because Edward Furlong's John Connor mentions it like once or twice. He says out loud, well, and my dad sent you back in time to protect me. No, or he said, my mom only knew my dad for one night, and it's crazy, but I really think she loves him. And then, I send you back in time to protect me or whatever. Like, it's just like the whole trippiness of time travel. Like, I never really sat down to really think about it in those terms, but from a narrative standpoint, it's really cool. Again, I've always said on the podcast, I love like time travel shit if done right. So I dug that, but the
Furlong.
Yeah, I'm not trying to find my place. I'm trying to find like what I want to say nicely. He was a sore spot of the film. Now, Joe Morton in the film, so that's
so good.
So that scene, even before that. So the scene where Sarah Connor, she finds out, she asks the Terminator, so what's your story? How does the world end? How does Skynet, come about? Like how does all this shit start? Who creates it? And Arnold says, is Miles Bennett Dyson on whatever date he's going to create this, blah 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 blah. And she has the idea of, what? If I kill him, he'll never create the program, whatever. So she goes to his house and she attempts to assassinate Miles Bennett Dyson with his wife.
The sound effect of her rifle. That first shot.
Yeah. She attempts to assassinate Miles Bennett Dyson with his wife and his kid there. And then she comes in and she shoots him and she's about to blow him away. His wife, Reva, the mail lady from Pee-wee's Playhouse, is freaking out on the floor with her kid, and
she's awesome.
Yeah, the kid's right there crying, and Linda Hamilton's right there, and then and Joe Morton in that scene, like she's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you, like you kill all those people, and he's like, what did I do? Like he genuinely doesn't know what the fuck is going on, like and then Arnold and Edward Furlong, what is Arnold? What do they call him in the movie?
The T-800.
Bob. They call him Bob. Because the guys, she introduces him to her friend. She's like, "Who's that?" He's my Uncle Bob. So anyway, Arnold and young John Connor come in right as she slumps to the floor because she can't do it. And the movie, this scene rubbed me the wrong way. And maybe you can try to help me understand, Brad. Maybe you can help me see it in a different light. But the movie in this moment wants Sarah Connor to be a sympathetic character. She was about to blow this guy away before Arnold and John even rolled up. She decided, I can't do this. She started to, have some clarity. She collapses on the floor.
You think she shouldn't have the clarity?
No. When she has some clarity, she slumps on the floor. Arnold and John come in the door. John goes over to her to console her. He says, "Hey, go check them out." Arnold goes over there to give Miles some medical attention. And in the film, it tries to make her like this sympathetic character. It wants me to feel bad for her. But she just did this really fucked up thing. Like, I don't like that. I feel like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I don't want to feel bad for her. Like, because what she did.
I think it's complicated.
I mean, it is, but it just feels... It feels mean, and it feels like she's let off the hook for what she did. Like I
agree with that.
Like she did, and a large part comes from how well Joe Morton and that Reva, how she plays that, because they are terrified.
I wish that scene ends with her not getting not pulling the trigger. Well, how many double negatives is that? I wish that the scene ended with the T-800 and John Connor stopping her,
right,
and not letting her off the hook.
It
would keep her, and it would keep that moment darker and more.
And she needs to be held accountable for that.
She's either held accountable for it or she's damned for it.
Yeah, because I don't feel like, because the next scene, she's on the counter and Miles Bennett Dyson's, he's getting, the Terminator's telling him, basically filling him in on everything. And Sarah Connor's just sitting there smoking a cigarette, and they don't address, she doesn't like, and I'm not saying she should apologize or be apologetic, but like what she did from a character standpoint, like I can't side with that. Like there's no,
but it's understandable. It is understandable. She's trying to prevent an apocalypse.
She is. But
there's a logic to it.
There is a logic to it, but when the movie addresses, specifically, he goes to her, "Are you okay?" Granted, that's your mother. Yeah, you're supposed to make sure you're okay, but you just disregard this family that you just did this like really horrible and heinous thing to. Like, and again, it's a testament to how Joel Morton plays that moment when he's just freaking. He's like, I don't know what I did. Like, I felt so bad for him. Like, I felt, and his wife and his little boy.
You're supposed to.
And again, I'm supposed to, but it just rubbed me the wrong way.
Well, it's horrible
because she does a horrible thing, but like, there's no. Like, it's just okay. Like, all right, now the mission is let's go to this other place.
Agreed. I agree with that.
And then on top of that, the motherfucker dies. So the kid's father actually does die, even though it's not in front of him, but still.
I think the Terminator 2 should end, and, Sarah Connor cannot walk away from this day. Right. She cannot.
Right.
And the film gives her a happy ending for the most part, and I do not like that.
Yeah. And so
John Connor can have a happy ending. The T-800 can have a happy ending, but I think narratively it would work better if she, died or is condemned, or she just cannot live to see 1997 and the bright sun out
because of, and it would all tie in back perfectly to the first film because everything that happened to her,
she has to sacrifice it all.
It consumed her so much so it changed her completely when we meet her in the second film.
Right.
So to regress back and say, all right, I'm happy again. Like, she's so far gone by the time we meet her in the first film. I don't see her having the happy ending. But so this leads us up to the assault on Cyberdyne headquarters when they say, all right, well, we got to go in. The Terminator from the first movie, we recovered the processor chip and we got his arm in a case. So we destroy all of that, destroy all the records, and none of this ever happens. So we had the famous scene where they go there and they are assaulted by the SWAT team. Arnold has the minigun and he shoots the SWAT team members he comes out with the freaking grenade launcher and the smoke launcher. Excuse me. So from an action scene standpoint, this is a really interesting scene. Firstly, it translates pretty well to 3D. George Cameron is not one for a lot of fast cuts or shaky cam. Like every camera shot is either on a tripod or a dolly. I don't remember seeing any handheld shots, and because of that, everything is. You can understand the flow of the action. There's an establishing shot of where Arnold is standing up in that window and how he's framed. So when you cut to the destruction he's causing down low, everything is visible and understandable. It's just a cleanly staged action sequence. And it reminded me of the conversation we had of when we were talking about Michael Bay in the Transformers films and how each of those action scenes had different stages, like or even in the island, how it would start in the train station and then it would escalate to the highway chase and then it would end up on the bikes and then the side of the building. Well, this particular action sequence follows similarly. Even the one earlier on with the chase sequence on the motorcycles in the Mack truck, when they were being pursued by the T-1000. But in this particular sequence, it starts inside with the shootout where Miles Bennett Dyson is hit. And then it goes to the sequence where Arnold takes the minigun and decimates like the squad cars. And then they still send some more guys in there and they have to try to get out. And they end up going down in the elevator and they get stuck in the lobby. So then you have the sequence when Arnold is shooting the guys with the smoke grenades to clear them a path to get out. Then he brings the truck back in. And then that leads into the chase down the highway with the helicopter because the T-1000 has commandeered that helicopter. He jumped the motorcycle out the second story window, and then spilled into the cockpit seat and took the helicopter. So that action sequence, film time was like maybe 10 minutes long. And 10 minutes is a long time in movie, in film. And so, but it was a really cleanly shot action sequence. The score, I don't know, like I wish if listeners, if you've seen this film, the 3D re-release, hit me up on social media. I almost swear that the score is different, or I've just never paid attention to it. I heard the score that I heard today, I don't remember hearing before, and the reason why it's of note to me is because I don't feel it was as dynamic as I maybe remembered it. It just didn't match the action and the escalation on scene. Like the score of the film did not match the power of the Terminator theme. So that was something that I noticed. In particular, it stuck out to me during this action sequence. But then it happens, and then that chase sequence leads into the factory. They crash they commandeer an 18-wheeler filled with the liquid nitrogen during that chase, and that leads them to the factory where the final confrontation takes place at the end. So like the last act of that film starts with the infiltration of Cyberdyne and ends with the end of the film, and that's almost all action. There are some character beats in there. There's some story beats. There's the beat with, again, some conversation between John and the Terminator in the building, with Sarah and Miles in the building. But then later on in the factory, you have the character moments between all three characters there, and then the final showdown. And so watching it this time, I was just reminded, or I don't even know if I noticed this the first couple times I've seen it, but the movie felt like it moved pretty briskly when you put together just what happens in the different set pieces. The introduction of the characters in the beginning, the chase to get John Connor, Terminator gets him first. They go break Linda Hamilton out of the psych ward. Then they go to the desert to get her guns, and then she goes to Miles's house to assassinate him, and then they go from there to Cyberdyne, and from Cyberdyne to the factory. Like, that's the film. And it moves at such a nice chop that, I don't know, like, I appreciate it about that, because you have this really complex storyline that's running through there about a guy from the future sending his robot back to the past to save himself and his mom and all this other shit. And then you have the complexity of Linda Hamilton seeing this protector who looks like a killer, but now he's protecting her son, and he's being the quote unquote father that he never had, and all the other people that she ran into during her time between the first film and the second film. So one last thing I want to point out before I get to the end, the thumbs up at the end, is that sequence when she has the nightmare sequence, when she envisions the bomb going off.
Jesus.
Again, a testament to Stan Winston in the studio and the practical effects. Even today in 2017, the city blowing up, the shots of the city blowing up, the building and the buses and stuff downtown Los Angeles, all that's miniature, and you can tell. And it's fine, because it's the attention to detail in those miniatures is it's outstanding. But the shots of the children turning to ash, and then her holding on to that fence, turning to ash, and then blowing away when the shockwave hits them. Again, the only comparable thing I would have of recent times is that those shots of the dragons turning the people to ash and they get blown away on Game of Thrones. And these practical effects still hold up just as well, if not better, than those effects on our recent episode of Game of Thrones. That shot where her body is holding on to the fence, it's on fire, and then the skin gets blown off in the muscle, and it's just the skeleton holding on to the fence. Dude, that was friggin' amazing. Amazing from just a technical standpoint and a visual standpoint. It was amazing. And then it being in 3D, the stuff coming off of the bones, just it was beautiful.
As a kid on VHS, I had to fast forward that.
Really?
It bothered me too much.
I would rewind that part. It was nuts. But yeah, so that's awesome. So again, props to Stan Winston and just that. It's funny because we have the introduction of, or one of the introductions of the use of CGI prominently in a character in the T-1000 in a film that also expertly uses practical effects. So that was an interesting mix of two types of tool sets to use to create visuals for a film. And I tell you what, a lot of the shots in the future with the battles were actors fighting against green screen and not matte backgrounds, but like projected backgrounds. Well, with the 3D, that barrier was the line was blurred because even the projection on the screens in the background, the giant machines, they were given 3D effect and depth, so you couldn't tell where the screen, the projection screen, and reality began. So it made for a better dioramic effect with the blurring of practical effects in the projection. So I thought that was cool too. And then the end of the film, like you mentioned, like her having that happy ending, and it was really on the nose about like it gave me hope that a robot could learn to love my son, and so maybe us humans could learn to love each other. And then it goes off, and so I mean, I don't know. I understand. Well, I'm not gonna say I understand. I can respect Terminator 2's firstly its fan base and what it's done, if anything, as far as like how it's forwarded the genre or whatever. For me, it would be more from a technical standpoint, and its pioneering of the CGI and the morphing technology and things like that. But other than that, as far as its contributions to science fiction, I mean, outside of the time travel stuff, like I don't know, like
the action's still cool.
The action's okay. Like that again, the set pieces are cleanly shot. That opening chase sequence with the dirt bike and the 18-wheeler, it's really tame compared to, I would say, even television style chase sequences today. But again, the geography and how everything's laid out, wide shots showing when Arnold, because you have to establish that you're shooting at two different times. That 18-wheeler and a lot of those scenes and those shots take place separately from when the guy's on the motorcycle. But there are wide shots that are smartly framed to let you know that this guy is entering the frame here, and where he's exiting is going to be where the 18-wheeler is. So subconsciously, you just match those shots up and everything works perfectly. So I have to say, like, it from a technical standpoint, it's not as complex as chase sequences we have today. There's no Fury Road by any means, but
everything can be Fury Road, Darren.
It's not even like the Road Warrior. But what I'm saying is everything is understood. They have no need to shake the camera to inject a sense of urgency. It's just smartly staged action.
Does the 3D version take anything from the supposed director's cut from the mid 90s, late 90s? Like, is Michael Bihn's dream sequence in there?
No. Okay. No. This is straight up theatrical T2. So I don't feel any different about the film. I gave it 3 stars on Letterboxd. It's fine. It's entertaining. I did have some issues with it, but I will say, like, I don't see. I guess I was.
What the big deal is.
Yeah, as far as like the 3D, it's not necessary. I don't think it's necessary. Firstly, I'm not going to say I don't see what the big deal is about T2 as a whole, as far as the zeitgeist of pop culture or whatever. I get it. I understand it.
It still ranks so high on people's lists.
It really does.
It's like nuts. No way. I much prefer the first Terminator by a lot.
As a kid, when I was younger, I would say the opposite of that. But now, as an adult, I echo that sentiment as well. If you have a chance to go see it in the theaters, by all means, go check it out. There's nothing wrong with revisiting a quote-unquote classic. Also, if not just to see if it still holds up in the same way that you remembered it.
I definitely want to see it just from straight nostalgia standpoint.
Yeah, there was a guy. It's funny. I loved when this happens. There was a guy, I would say he was like in his 20s, mid-20s or whatever, and I'm pretty sure this was his first time seeing it. And that's always awesome. Just going by his reactions to stuff.
How was he reacting?
I mean, this dude, like, at certain points, he was like sitting up on the edge of his seat, like, and he didn't know, like, he was, oh man, are they going to make it? Is this going to happen? Like, what's going to happen next? And like certain things would happen, and it would. I just got the feeling that it was his first time hearing certain things and seeing certain things, and so he came away really enjoying it.
Well, that's cool.
From my understanding. So that was awesome. But yeah, I don't know. We live in a really, we shit on the state of the theatrical experiences in Hollywood and films, but I think the flip side of that is we do live in a wonderful time where, we have a younger generation who their first time seeing an old film can be in a movie theater. Like before, like that wasn't something that was accessible to me when I was younger. Like I would just have to watch it on VHS or on TMC or whatever. But thanks to our Alamo Draft House, thanks to, when AMC has these Fandango or whatever, not Fandango, Fathom events, things like
Star
that.
Trek 2 is coming back to theaters.
So, again, there are going to be some people who've never seen that film before, and they can have their first time seeing that film be in 2017 in a movie theater. So that's always a cool thing. So, yeah, that was pretty much my week in dork. So be on the lookout. Our next homework cast is going to be Tony Scott's Domino. That was given to Wife Dork by you, right, B?
Yeah.
So you know what? Your enthusiasm. Here's the thing. I've always liked that film. Can't say I loved it as much as you, but I've always liked that film. But your enthusiasm about that film has got me really excited to go back and revisit it. So I'm looking forward to that. We got the Monster Squad reunion at the Winchester Alamo Draft House on Wednesday.
Yeah, the 30th.
That's freaking exciting. First of all, if not for anything but just to get to see the Monster Squad on the big screen.
Wolfman's got nards.
Again, another movie with some amazing practical effects and the greatest greatest on-screen mummy.
Mummy came in my room.
Yes.
It is the Cumcast.
All right. So there's that coming up. And then our film club. So you have a couple weeks to catch up on our next film club title, my film club title, which is going to be Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. So this was Wife Dork's pick. And I believe she picked it because of King Arthur.
She loves it.
Or because it's an awesome movie.
It's it's one of her all-time favorite movies.
As it should be. So that's exciting. And then we have our Death Note cast. That should be out probably midweek, I think. And we'll be talking about, again, as I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, the new Netflix Adam Wingard adaptation of the manga and anime.
Darren wishes he could go back on his Fistful of Summer episode and insert Death Note, I think.
Yikes, I do not. But I will say this, as an I told you so kind of thing, Brian does actually wish he can go back and amend his Fistful to include Girls Trip because, like I said, it was a great freaking movie and he loved it like I did. Right, B?
Yes.
Yeah!
Nope, no backsies, can't do it. Sorry. Not allowed.
All right, so B, tell the people they can find you.
Find me on all social medias at Mouth Dork.
You can find Brian at the Turtle Dork on Twitter, at the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, and at Brian William Young on Facebook. And right across from me with his mic off, Wife Dork. You can find her laying down because she's got a migraine. She's not feeling good. So send her well wishes on Twitter, at Sidewalk Siren, on Instagram at Sidewalk Siren, and Letterboxd at Sidewalk Siren. You can't send her well wishes on Letterboxd.
You can drop ship her some drugs.
Yes, do that. And I'm Darren Smith, the Disco Dork on all social medias. That's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. And until next time.